here we are with another episode for Burnin 8s. So this is a little bit different style, but we've had a series going with Reinert, who flew all the way up from Florida to give us some information about baits and kind of pick up where we left off last year with those episodes that we did, the bucktails and topwater. Kind of some tips revolving around that, and now we've done 3 other ones up until this point, and we're on our 4th. So the other ones, we're going to link to all of them down in the description below if you guys have missed any of those and want to check them out. But we've hit so far dive and rise, we did minnow baits, and we did some oddball, somewhat unique baits. And it's kind of a wide range, but you broke it down nicely as far as the differences and what these baits can all do and how they can work to put more fish in the net for you.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to get into rubber, and again, to me, rubber's not that tough. You know, let me tell you something I feel about rubber in general, or any musky bait. You know, I don't think, in this my opinion, size does not make a difference except for certain situations, and I'll give you a situation. If you go to northern Wisconsin, where I lived before, okay, you a lot of our Cisco-based lakes, we have, you know, small Ciscos in those lakes. Most of the lakes up in northern Wisconsin basically have a yellow perch population. They have a white sucker population, you know, maybe a mix of white sucker or red horse, but most of the forage sunfish, they're small. Now, the comment I made before, there are certain situations. If you were to go to Vermilion Lake up in Minnesota, and where their Ciscos and whitefish are of good size, throwing a pounder makes a lot of sense to me, especially if the fish are keying in on that forage at the time. Because that's what muskies do. They key in on the forage of what they're feeding on. So if you go in and they're feeding on a bunch of sunfish or bluegill, and you're out there chucking a pounder, well, maybe you might catch a fish, but the fact of it is you'll probably have more action throwing that regular Bulldog or regular size or a mid-size, you know, Medusa than you are, you know, a pounder. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the old theory of matching the hatch, basically.
Well, and it is
matching the bait that's in the lake.
And it is, and I'm just at the point at my age, I'm not going to kill myself. There's no reason. If I can be just as productive on throwing a smaller bait and not, you know, tear myself up doing it, then that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. So the first bait I throw is definitely a chaos. And then we talked about this in various, you know, when people look at chaos tackle, this is the bait that everybody knows chaos tackle for, is the Medusa. That's no secret. There's a lot of guys that threw, you know, Medusas, right, and they catch a lot of fish. But at the same time, I look at the condition I'm using a Medusa. This is a mid, okay, and I know a lot of guys like, you know, the regular, but when I normally throw this bait is usually when I'm fishing shallow flats. Now, I made the comment about throwing minnow baits. If the conditions are perfect, and I know the fish are up on the flats, I'm going to burn the flat with a bucktail, and or I'm going to, you know, use a minnow bait, whether it be a twitching minnow bait, and or if the vegetation's high, that's when I'm going to use the shallow, the 7-inch shallow. Okay, that's the, you know, the purpose of that bait. But if the fish are virtually inactive, neutral to inactive, and there's still fish up on the flats, because fish do one or two things when the weather changes. They either are going to suspend, they're going to make a horizontal movement out, you know, and they're going to suspend. So when I'm in this situation using a Medusa, those fish are going to be in a neutral, inactive state. The fish are either suspending or they bury themselves up in the vegetation, and they're just laying there. So, and a lot of times what I'll do is this is when I use a Medusa. And so you talk about some tips. The first thing I do is I try to take and stretch these things out before I use them. I think this one I could have done a better job. And I stretch them out and I hold them, and I don't want to pull on them so hard that they break, but I stretch that rubber out. You know, I kind of loosen up the rubber itself. But what it does is it'll loosen up the tails, and actually then they swim a lot better. So I haven't really played with this too much, this one. You know, that's what I do to basically tune these, number one. So if you want to call it that.
Sure.
And number two, there's two things I do with a Medusa. You know, easy bait to work. You cast it out, and basically you're pulling it just like a jerk bait. Okay? So, see, I'm not really putting so much pressure, but I'm just kind of stretching that rubber out, but where I don't break it. I never, ever grab the tails themselves and pull from there. I pull in here where the meat begins in the tail. So, so I know you're very good with rubber, Jake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and undo this. We're going to have you know, we're going to let you show people how to work a Medusa. I mean, it's that simple, because a lot of people do ask. You know, you'd be amazed. And I had mentioned when we've done these, we've had people that have actually asked, you know, how do you work a Medusa? Okay, so we're gonna let Jake do that. You don't mind if it's on that rod, do you?
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, they're gonna get the idea here. And that doesn't look too bad, does it? No. But I know I just stretched that bait. And so it just gives the legs a little more action,
Yep.
you know. So Jake is gonna basically toss this bait out, and it's just simple. It's not that hard. Now he rips it up. I noticed.
It depends. Depends how shallow it is. If it's shallow,
There you go. Exactly.
up, but
I have
either
a
the side or up.
And exactly, you can go up or to the side. But here's the one thing about a Medusa: the bait seems to coast. Where the lead is in that bait, it seems to coast a little better. So basically, as you saw with Jake, he was just pumping the rod up or to the side, and depending on how shallow or how deep will determine whether you're working in an upward motion or to the side. Now, I'm gonna tell you, a Medusa. And I think in most cases, most people do have a Medusa. I think, when it comes to rubber, I think everybody should have a couple Medusas.
I would say our most common size would be the regular that we fish. Like
You're throwing a regular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and I've seen
Just
you do
a touch-
that.
which is just a touch bigger than the mid, but
Yeah.
But
we do have mids in our tackle box. I mean, we threw Huskies over on St. Clair.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand why you throw Huskies on St. Clair. I mean, they've got basically a micro, they've got a mini, they've got a mid, they've got a regular, they've got the Husky, they've got
Monster.
a monster. I mean, they've got, several sizes for you to choose from, as well as different colors.
Right. But
So,
like that's part of the size, for us is you talked about, you're matching the forage base in the lake.
listen, rubber's not new. I mean, before there was a Bulldog, there was stingers, there were fish baits, all the same thing. Most of the younger guys don't realize we were fishing. Bulldog has actually, in Musky Innovations, has really done a good job of promoting rubber. They've changed the industry per se. And Medusa's, like you said, it's got multiple tails. It's got its place. The two baits that I fish with the most is a Medusa, and of course I use Bulldogs. There's a bait that you guys use a lot, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't use it. It's just it hasn't really been presented to me. You use a toad.
Yep.
And so you enlighten me about this, Jake. I'm all ears to listening to you about a toad.
The one thing that we notice with toads is the hang time that they come off of them, especially the shallow ones. But even the ones that are regular weighted, the hang time of them is just amazing, and that seems like the best time for them to eat.
Which is one thing to keep in mind too, is the different weighting,
Yeah.
the regular and the shallow. Even with Medusas and Bulldogs. You have different weighting with them.
Oh, exactly. I think both companies actually make weights now you can attach to the baits in order to either get deeper or, get them down to where if you're hopping the baits quicker, moving the baits quicker, they can stay down. That's an important thing.
And all these things do is they hop,
So basically here's the thing, I think there's been a point where some people have had problems with toads.
Yeah,
and in
'cause
all
they-
fairness,
they were-
because people don't understand how to use them.
Yeah, they would rip them like you would a Bulldog.
Right.
And these ones you have to actually hop.
Yeah, I'd say one way you don't necessarily rip a toad, it's more hopping it through the
Yeah,
water.
Okay.
yeah, just small hops and pulls.
It's got great action. There's no doubt about it. But
Yeah.
because, of I don't want to say my naiveness or whatever you want, I just never have had a chance to really throw a toad.
Yeah.
About the time toads came into their place, that's when a lot of my health issues began. I mean, everybody knows that, Lake X Lures is the company that makes this bait. They make the Dr. Evils and the Fat Bees and I think the Cannonball Juniors and
B-52s.
yeah, B-52s. They've got, so it's not that we have forgotten them. They're definitely a part of the rubber market, but it's just that I think a lot of guys had trouble. And it wasn't because there was anything wrong with the bait, is that guys didn't understand the bait.
You can,
I'll let you put this
subtle
one.
change it. You can subtly change those how they run too.
Yeah.
Just like kind of Medusa too. I mean, if you curve that Medusa a little bit more, or
Yes,
flatten it out,
that's
you can-
another, when
You can flatten them out too to bring it. Usually run it shallower. Usually if you curve them slightly, they run a little bit deeper. It doesn't take a lot to change.
it doesn't take a lot, I'll guarantee you. So the next bait, of course, with the rubber is this is probably the company that made rubber popular. It wasn't, as I said before, we had baits like stingers that were made by Greg Bone. We've got, fish baits. They were out of Illinois. Basically the same concept, but I think Brad took this to a different level. When you look at the body of a Bulldog, it's definitely different looking. It's not, it looks like something out of Star Wars. Got how'd that work? Beautiful, didn't it? This here, the fact of it is, this here is what's called an ice walleye. We've talked about color, but that I think is another episode. If you want to do that, we can do that. I don't care so much about the color of the bait, but it's the contrast that this bait portrays coming through the water, and it does look different. I made the comment yesterday when we were talking about dive and rise that I have a tendency to like brighter colored chop baits or dive and rise baits because I think it's easier as the bait is working for the fish to key in on that bait. It's the same thing with rubber. I have a tendency, if you look here, it's got a chartreuse belly, it's got black, it's got gold glitter, it's got a little bit of white, it's got a little bit of everything. And this is not the standard Bulldog color that you're going to buy on the marketplace. Like everybody else, I buy my Bulldogs from Team Rhino Outdoors, and the reason I do is he's made all these colors, these different colors, and in this case, this is one of my favorite colors. I could bring all kinds of them because I definitely have plenty of them in the boat, to use. But the key thing, I just wanted to bring that up about color right away, but the key thing about this bait is it has a tendency to go head down. So before we were talking about Medusas, working over flats because of the hang time along with the toad. This bait has a tendency, if I've got a steep break, like on this shoreline right here, it drops off quick in deeper water, or if it's a massive front, I want to get that bait down in front of the fish's face. And that's what a Bulldog does, and does it very well. This is definitely a bait, a tool in the box that, again, I think everybody should have. It's not that hard. Jake's going to show you how easy it is to throw this bait. But remember, whereas a Medusa may glide a little more or have a little more hang time, this doesn't. This drops. Now that being said, they also make a shallow version, but I think there's very little difference. I have a tendency to use a lot of shallow because of the water I'm fishing. So unless it's in the fall time, then I'll use a regular Bulldog. And I use a regular Bulldog for just about everything. I make it real simple. Look how that bait stands out in the water. And that's my number one color right there, ice walleye. Look how visible that is. The flash that's coming off that bait. Because again, as I said before in the past, the muskies have got to be able to feel them through their lateral line. They've got to be able to hear it through their inner ear. And then once they've keyed in on the bait, they've got to be able to see that bait. Once you put those three things together in the proper presentation, then you got a winner.
Yep.
The other Bulldog that I use is a double dog. This is the other bait, and this is his sucker pattern. This is a stock color. If you'll notice, the tails, okay, are horizontal and not vertical. What this bait does, with those tails being horizontal, it kind of slows down the sink rate. I love this bait in the fall period. This bait slows down, very manageable, and I'll tell you who's probably one of the best at fishing plastics, and that's Brian Schaefer. He's a guide up out of Tomahawk, Wisconsin. The man's an animal when he comes to working a Bulldog. He's definitely very good at it. See how that bait kind of hangs a little bit and hops a little
more hang time than just the single-tailed one.
Exactly. There's a time and place for both. I have a tendency to use that when I need to hang, when I need to hang a bait, a massive cold front, I want a bait to move a little bit slower. I love using a double dog.
Yep.
I think both baits should be in a musky fisherman's box, without a doubt. So that's the other Bulldog, and again, I stick with the regular size. I was out one time, I was out with John Carlson one time, we were out fishing, and I threw a pounder for about, I don't know, half hour. That's about all I'm gonna give a pounder. That's a lot of work, Yep. So, anyways.
It is work, but they have their time and place.
Oh, the example I gave you about Lake Vermilion is a perfect example. Right. But I'm not gonna do it,
No.
You guys can, but you will pay the price when you get older. Just remember I said that to you. The other bait I gotta bring up, it's not a rubber bait, but I gotta bring this up because you're gonna work it very similar, to a Bulldog. All right, this bait gets down in the water. The reason I just want to bring this up, it does have a rubber tail in the back, but this thing has accounted for a lot of big muskies. Guys have been catching them, but same thing, guys are keeping this quiet. This is called a Beaver. It has been on the market for several years.
Yep.
A lot of guys do know about it, but if you'll notice, you're basically using it just like I've got it weighted. It comes with a screw hole, for the weights to be screwed in. But it works just like a rubber bait. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I got a couple of them.
You do have, okay.
Yep.
Well, but there's a lot of guys, it's amazing, don't even know about it.
Yeah, that tail moves a lot of water.
Yes, it does. It does move a lot of water. So I definitely wanted to bring that up. It's called a Beaver, and he's going to put her back out there again. He's hoping a muskie's going to chomp on that thing, don't you?
All these baits look so good with their hang time.
Oh, yeah.
Just wait for one to smoke it.
Exactly. So the next bait that we're going to talk about, okay, the next bait that we're going to talk about is a bait that a lot of it's had some, I don't want to say dismal reviews, but people look at it and they don't understand it. I made the comment in one of the other videos that, Chaos Tackle is known for their assault sticks. I think they make, another 2020 rods.
Yep.
I think you guys use those a lot.
Yep.
They make the Medusa. That is what Chaos Tackle is known for. But the fact of it is, they make You know, they make a walk the dog bait. It's called a Bubba. I love it. It's probably one of the best walk the dog baits on the market, and we use them. And we've caught many fish on them. They make gliders. They make the Navin that we showed during the dive and rise. But there's a bait they make. It's called a Pegasus. And you know, when you look at this bait, it doesn't look like it's anything. It's just like a chunk of rubber that's diamond shaped. And most people look at this bait and they think it's kind of like it's a lipless crankbait. And in bait, essentially that's what it is. The difference in this crankbait is that it sinks nose down. And the purpose of this bait is basically we walk it along a rocky areas is what we do. We also use this bait for vertical jigging. Now, here's a situation. As time goes on, there is a lot of people that have limited time. In today's world, people are working more. They're spending more time with their families, their kids. So when they have time to musky fish, you know, you want to utilize that time efficiently. Okay? When I go out on the water now, I've been pretty beat up with heart operations. So I can't last 12, 14 hours, 15 hours a day like you would, you know, last. I mean, when you guys go out and film, I know you guys put in a 15-hour day. You don't play. I mean, when I was younger, I did the same thing. I can't. It's just physically, I can't do it like I used to anymore. So I've got to utilize my time on the water. This Pegasus, I'm going to tell you right now, I always have these, you know, around. Mm-hmm. You know, have you used these yet?
We have not. We've contemplated. I mean,
Well, again, when this bait comes to the water, here, did you take the bait off?
Yeah.
Here, put this on once. You tell me what you feel. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's going to go head down. Mm-hmm. It is controllable. You go ahead and what do you feel?
Oh yeah, that thing vibrates a lot.
It vibrates a lot.
Yeah.
Most people don't even, and again, you know, in this case, you know,
I didn't think it would.
Huh?
I wouldn't think it would that
I
much.
know you wouldn't think that it would, but I'm going to tell you, we've kept our mouth shut. I'm old. I have health problems. I'm not going to keep my mouth shut anymore. I mean, if I can help somebody catch more fish, this is a great bait. I can tell you right now, they got a multitude of colors. It's not hard to fish. You're casting out and cranking. I'm just telling you, that bait, when it excels, if you got rocky, sandy shorelines and you want to keep that bait in contact with the bottom, you know, when the fish are inactive, it works when the fish are active. Another thing we do with this, when I basically work this, is I don't crank them. When I toss this bait, I throw it out. It's going down. That's exactly what I do. I'm a little more aggressive with this bait. And I'm going to tell you, when these fish deck this thing, they don't play. So with your as you saw, and I knew I hit weeds. Here's another thing I'm going to tell you. When, you know, if this bait tangles, you're going to know instantly because you're going to feel the bait spinning through, you know, the water.
like a Poseidon.
Huh?
Like
Yeah.
a Poseidon, you instantly know when it tangles.
Right, so we got vegetation out here, so I can't really do it, but it'll get down fast, and you can sit there and you can just, what I'm doing with this. I'm a little more aggressive, you know, than I am with, you know, other baits, but when you're aggressive like that, Jake, pull on it. You can feel that thing. It'll rattle your arm, you know, it'll rattle up to your armpits. And again, if it tangles, you're going to know it because you're not going to feel the rattle. It's got a lot of vibration, doesn't it? But it's
for a rubber bait, you wouldn't think it would vibrate like that.
It's a lipless crankbait. It's really,
Yeah.
I mean, it looks, you know, it's pretty erratic too.
Oh, the fish love it. When they pound it, they belt it. And here's the nice thing about that bait. Not only do you sit there, we not only caught the muskies, but we also caught a 27-inch walleye.
Really, that's impressive.
You know, so you're going to get a lot of walleyes on this, especially coming up here soon. Well, actually now we're in that period where you'll bust a lot of fish. Most of the time when I'm fishing that bait, I like black. You know, you're bouncing that thing, you're dragging it in the rocks, and like I said, it's head down, so it's virtually snagless. So we use black. They make a color called Turd Ferguson. You know, we use that a lot. It's basically a black, a brown with gold scale on it. They make some, you know, gold shaded, you know, gold glitter shaded baits. You know, the walleye pattern. You know, those are the ones I pretty much stick with. But he's also got some hot colors, and it's amazing. This company puts these out, and they just can't give them away because nobody really understands them. So
I can see that working really well, like along river channels too, with drop-offs where you can work that down.
Big time,
yeah.
big time,
yeah.
big time. That's what we were doing this morning, but we had a lot of rocks. So basically, you know, it's a rubber bait. It's not a Bulldog. It's not a Medusa, but it's definitely got its purpose.
Yep.
Okay, so really, that's, you know, it's that simple. I mean, it wasn't really hard, and hopefully I've clarified in the beginning, as I clarified, you know, the thought process with us doing this. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a quick rundown of some of the, I would say, top baits as far as rubber baits.
Yeah, and there's other baits out there. I'm not
Right.
saying they're bad. I'm just saying these are the baits that I use, and
Yep.
and I've kind of settled on after all these years. These work for me. I feel
Right.
comfortable. And the Pegasus, to many, that's going to be a new bait, but that's been around a while. I love that bait.
Yeah. Look, it's definitely a unique vibration, or you can see that they
Yeah.
vibrate through the water,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's a unique presentation. But yeah, I mean, we've seen it for years. You know, it's been around for a
But
while.
but did you try it because
No.
you were afraid because you weren't sure?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just basically trying to open the door for people to try some new things,
Yep.
to hopefully they become more consistent in catching the muskie in the limited time they have.
Yep. So there, another episode in the books,
Yeah.
and a little bit of information and some new baits to try out. So if you guys aren't using them, that'll conclude this episode, guys. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back with one more yet. We've got some glide baits coming in the next one.
Sure.
So stay tuned for that, guys. But thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.